with Mr. Swaran Singh, Professor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and one of the India's top China experts. So, Mr. Singh, welcome to Northeast Live, first of all.
Thank you.
All right, I also have with me Mohanto Panging, who is joining us live this evening and from Pasighat. And also let me tell the viewers here that he is the former Indian Air Force pilot. So welcome to Northeast Live, Mr. Panging. All right, so first of all, let me go to Mr. Swaran Singh. So, Mr. Singh, the move by the Chinese authorities to issue staple visas to Indian athletes has triggered outrage not only across the nation, particularly the people of the Northeast. So, first of all, your take on this, Mr. Singh.
I think first of all, this is not a good sign from the Chinese side. You would remember only 3 days back, there was discussion between India's National Security Advisor and Wang Yi in Johannesburg, from where it came out that in last November, Indian Prime Minister, when he met in Bali, Chinese President Xi Jinping had actually expressed a desire to resolve mutual relations without advertising it much, which would create expectations. That means India was very seriously looking for resolving the relationship, which has been tense for over last 3 years after the Galwan incident of June 2020. Now suddenly this fairly irritating, and you can see the response from India, the entire contingent is being withheld right now, is a response which is expected. And as you mentioned in the opening remarks, this is not the first time, and Chinese knew how India is going to respond to such a gesture from their side to issue staple visas to three of the sports persons who were going for these Wushu tournaments in China, in Sichuan. So knowing fully well how India will respond, I think this was not a very wise way of dealing with this situation. And let me quickly add that it is not just Chinese. The event is being actually held under the auspices of Asia's Olympic Council, and therefore, it's an international body which also should be consulted and has a say in how a country can bring in its own bilateral whims and fancies in treating international sort of athletes who are coming to join an international event. It's not a Chinese event; it's a multilateral international event, and I think China has to be careful as to what the Olympic Council will think of it. And India should approach Olympic Council as well as to whether this is the correct way to bring in your bilateral whims and fancies into a multilateral event like this. You would also remember very recently, India invited the foreign minister of Pakistan into a multilateral meeting. So multilateral meetings are usually different, and they have different protocols and expectations compared to bilateral issues that countries may have had. I think it's fundamentally not a good gesture right now, particularly when India is expecting President Xi Jinping to come and join the G20 summit meeting in early September. This was the time one would make gestures of finding resolution to tensions and irritations and bring in the positive element in the relationship. So I think it's a kind of not a good gesture right now, and India has taken a correct response to how to deal with it.
Right, Dr. Singh, and this is also not the first time. Earlier also China has done something similar in the year 2011.
Indeed. So that is exactly what I was underlining, that since Chinese had done something similar in 2011, twice actually in 2011,
yes,
and they knew how India is going to respond to a kind of a decision like this, to issue stapled visas to three of the athletes in the entire contingent. And India would sort of respond the way India did in last instances. So it's not that they were not aware of how India is going to respond to this, and still they decided to go ahead and do the same thing. I understand that India's Ministry of External Affairs has already called the ambassador of China to come and explain this. So I hope some resolution happens in time, so that athletes who've been working so hard to go and perform in these events, they should not be penalized because some country has some unusual understanding of how they want to deal with these issues. Here is a matter of sports, and sports are something which should not be part of politics, and therefore I think they should be allowed to go and perform. And the onus then lies on China how to make sure that something they have done is rectified, and they are issued normal visas to go there as Indian citizens and participate in those games. which are international games. I'm underlining repeatedly. It's not something that Chinese nationally are holding, inviting India as a bilateral guest. It's an international event, and therefore I think they have to really know how to make sure that all international athletes are able to join and then perform as they have been preparing for these events for a long time.
All right, again to Dr. Swaransh Singh. So, Dr. Singh, after this move by the China, reactions came in from different quarters across the nation. Now, there are many eminent personalities. They are saying that India should also follow suit and provide stable visas to Chinese players and even delegates who visit India in the near future.
I think clearly the formal response that Ministry of External Affairs has already publicized
Yes.
is to say that we reserve the right to respond in appropriate manner as and when we determine what that response will be. So fundamentally, there is definitely a commitment to response. Now, what that response will be known over a period of time, whether it is going to be, tit for tat, issuing stapled visas to certain citizens of China in future, as is being suggested by my panelists, or it's going to be some other way. It's not necessary tit for tat. There are sometimes different ways of convincing the other side or compelling the other side to rectify the way of dealing with another nation, or to comply with what India would like them to do for Indian citizens from Arunachal Pradesh. They are going there as part of India's Wushu team. They are not representing a separate part of India. They are part of total India, and therefore you can't treat them as part of India, which is to be treated separately. And India would not absolutely tolerate that. Now, what kind of that response will be known over a period of time, and maybe sometime response is such that it doesn't come in public very quickly. It may be known little later. But what I'm saying here is that response is being committed by Indian side already. As I said, there's a statement from Minister of External Affairs, but response may not necessarily be in terms of tit for tat of India beginning to issue similar stapled visas, but response is definitely guaranteed, as former member of parliament also mentioned, and I think my co-panelist from Air Force also mentioned. There is a different India and there is a different response that we are noticing this time. The entire contingent was disallowed to board the flight, even from the airport. And I think that should be a good message to reach out to Beijing, and they should understand how to resolve this knot that they have tied around themselves. And if they want to resolve issues, they have to make initiatives and untie the knots that they have sort of built around now on this issue. And I assume that some response from the Chinese side should be coming soon, so that they don't miss out any part of the formal events that are going to take place there. And Indian participation is going to be noticed. India is very noticeable country now around the world, and therefore India's absence will be noticed not just in India but around the world in that sense. I think Chinese have to be careful with the cost they may have to pay off making such a gesture, which is going to really be unacceptable to India.
All right.